lounging, son.
So first off, I want to welcome everybody back to another episode of Creator Chat. Today I have one of my favorite new creators that I've discovered over the last couple of years, Emma Kubert, who, if you know the last name, you know that name holds a lot of weight in the industry. Welcome, Emma. How's it going?
Hi, it's going good.
Awesome. So first off, I know you come from a long line of creators that everybody should know. If they don't know, I don't know what rock they're under. But, I was wondering if you could share a little bit with the listeners that may not be familiar with your work, a little bit about yourself.
Well, basically, I grew up with art, of course. I come from a long line of comic creators. So my grandpa, started off in the industry, and then he created the Kubert School, and that's where, my uncle and my dad went as well. And then when I decided that I wanted to do more comic art, I actually went to school for animation at first, and then I went back to the Kubert School to study more art. Mm-hmm. And I actually studied right under my dad and my uncle, who taught there at the time. And now, I graduated, I think, 2018, and I'm really just starting my career now in comics, and I'm really excited to see what happens with it.
So would you say that being a cartoonist was always in the plan? Like, I know, for instance, your dad and your uncle, I've heard the stories that they were lettering when they were like 12. So I'm just curious, like, how early did it start for you?
Well, honestly, for me, I wasn't really into comics when I was younger. My dad, bringing home comics, it would either be Cartoon Network comics or, big manly men superhero comics. And me being, a 10-year-old girl, not really into that stuff, I wasn't really having it. So I kind of took more to the animation and to like young adult fiction in books and media and everything. So growing up, that was mostly what I was inspired by, but I always loved drawing. I always loved art and storytelling. So I thought animation would be a great thing to go into, except when I went into animation, I found out that animating is actually the worst thing to do ever. I'm kidding, but it was really not for me. I think most of it comes down to that I liked, working from start to finish on a project instead of just, drawing the same person over and over again. So then I did make that transition to go to the Kubert School, and even then I really wasn't about comics. I was thinking more like concept art, storyboarding, all that kind of stuff. But then when I was going through the school and a lot of the assignments we would get, obviously we would do a lot of comic book work. And I just kind of took to it, and I was like, all right, well, I guess this was for me the whole time, and I just found out now. Okay.
So,
yeah.
So besides the obvious, who are some of the artists that you looked up to, or what were some of the comic books or anything? Well, you said comic books, not really, but like, what really inspired you to make that jump into being an artist yourself? Like I said, besides, obviously.
Besides, besides the obvious. But I would say being an artist was always in the cards. It was just, I wasn't sure what kind of artist I wanted to be. Mm-hmm. And so my decision to more become a comic book artist really came from going through the school. And okay, I will say, my dad obviously inspired me to be that, but while I was in school, he was working on Dark Knight 3 with Frank Miller. And that was probably one of the biggest influences. Like, Frank Miller's work is a big influence on my own work. And it's mostly the storytelling and like the utter contrast of everything. And the fact that, clear storytelling is what pulls through with this artist with Frank Miller. It's pure storytelling at its finest. And I was kind of like, I want to do that. So going through school, seeing my dad make that transition from like his comic-y work to more like Frank Miller-esque, and me learning from that really was probably the core of, you know, me learning comic books and learning how to draw them.
That's really interesting. I definitely, I don't think Frank Miller would have been the name that I would have thought of for you to say. It's very interesting. Can you share a little bit about, you know, I didn't have this in my notes, but I'm kind of curious. Can you share a little bit about what it entails, like going through the Kubert school, maybe for somebody that wants to go there themselves?
Well, I would say going through the Kubert school is one of the hardest and most rewarding times of my life. It's 3 years of, you know, you do 10 classes a week, you got 2 classes a day, so you got 10 assignments a week. You're basically drawing probably around like 10 to maybe 14 hours a day of just pure, just going, drawing, doing everything that you possibly can. So it is a lot of work, and it can get really tough, but coming out of it, you know, you're constantly making yourself draw, so you're gonna be better. You're always gonna be better if you are constantly doing the thing that you're trying to practice. So going to the Kubert school, learning from professionals, constantly doing work, you are rewarded with, you know, skills.
As you started like working more like with comics, and you're at the school, like what comics did you find yourself gravitating towards, since you didn't really read too many growing up?
Honestly, I like the ones that I read growing up were more like cartoons. Like I think Calvin and Hobbes was an obvious favorite of mine, but I actually took more to like the older comics. I like a lot of Alex Toth and Alex Raymond were really good references for me during school. Darwin Cook was another creator that I looked at his work as well. What was the question again?
Oh, I was just asking you, you know, like you said, like you read mostly like the cartoon comics, right?
Yeah.
So I was wondering, like, as you started getting more into comics and realizing like, okay, so I'm gonna do, what comics did you get?
Okay. Well, I think the biggest thing that I realized about myself was that I, one, love fantasy and I love young adult genre. I just like the growth of the characters from kid to adulthood, constantly in that theme. And actually, when I was, you know, looking at the kind of comics that I wanted to go into, it was probably more the graphic novel, young adult type of route. And that actually started to get a lot bigger when I went into the comic industry. So that's kind of what I'm trying to go for, and what I'm trying to do for my own career is that type of genre. Just because I take to it more, I guess.
Yeah, I think, you know, like, you know, I'm gonna, before I get back into some of the questions I had, I think that's awesome of you. I think it's insane for me, as, you know, I'm a parent, so like I'm seeing the growth of it too, because I'm also looking for it more, right? Yeah. But I work at a shop, so I'm constantly seeing every week, I'm seeing all of these publishers. You have DC doing their line, you have Scholastic, you have Random House, you have First Second, so much. And like, I read them, I love them. There's so many great stories. Great. I mean, it's YA, but I think it's all A, in my opinion. I think everybody can enjoy those stories.
Oh, I was just gonna say that I think the biggest thing that I like about it is that it's very inclusive of like all people, all ages. Like, even though it is called young adult, it really is like bringing in diversity and different kinds of characters and different kinds of genre to comics, which is something that I really wanted when I was young, because as I said before, all I would get were like, you know, either kids cartoons, or I would get like old man superhero like comics. And that's great if you like it, but it really was just not for me. And that's kind of what it felt like the comic world was like. It was either one extreme or another. And I really wanted something that was very much in between. So me growing up and going into the comic industry and then finding out that there's all these amazing comics coming out for the age that I was when I wanted those kinds of comics, I'm like, all right, well, I guess that's my life goal, to make those kinds of comics for, 13-year-old Emma.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think it's important too, because, like I was talking with one of my friends that's a part of my site. We were talking about like representation in comics, right? And like growing up when I was a kid, I mean, it's not that long ago, you know what I mean? Like I'm only 33, but still, like I didn't have any friends that were girls that were into comics. And I had a lot of friends that were girls. Like I tended to gravitate more towards girls, especially in elementary school, middle school. And, it's cool as a dad now who has a daughter to be able to give her, like, there is so much I can give her to read that has nothing to do with superheroes. And they even have the superhero stuff too, but it's more geared towards young girls as opposed to just young boys or like old men, I don't know how else to say it.
That's exactly what I'm saying. And that's kind of the thing that I want to accomplish in my career, is that I want to create stories that aren't just for a certain audience. I want like everyone to experience it and everyone to have a good time with any stories that I create. So, that includes a lot of diversity, a lot of different story that's not just superheroes, but that's of like a lot of different types of topics and everything. So that's storytelling.
I mean, so far I think you're doing a great job. I mean, like I said, I discovered your work through a Kickstarter, your Willowbrook book.
Awesome.
And I loved it. I thought it was amazing. And before we get into your new book, I just want to ask real quick, what's going on with Willowbrook? Do you plan on continuing it? Would it be Kickstarter? Would it be through Image? Like, do you have any plans?
The best thing about what happened with Willowbrook was that I mostly did this Kickstarter just to see like what it's like to do a Kickstarter, really just dive in to see, that experience. And it was a lot of work, one.
Yeah.
But also, it was kind of like seeing if I could continue this comic, which wasn't really working out. But what I did was that I combined Willowbrook, and with my co-creator, Rusty Glad, we created like a whole new idea that Willowbrook entailed like a couple other ideas that I had when I was back in school. And that's what created Inkblot. So if you read Inkblot and you've contributed to the Kickstarter, you're gonna see elements from that story into it, and it's exciting. It's like an evolved version. So it is a continuation, I guess.
I mean, I just wanted to ask because I wasn't sure, but I did. I read Inkblot #1. I got the advance from Image. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was awesome.
Yay.
And I'm glad I was able to read it before talking to you, so I kind of have like the idea. And I definitely see the influence of Willowbrook.
Yeah, definitely.
For everybody that isn't as familiar with the book, hasn't got a chance to read it, can you share a little bit about the book and where the idea came from?
Well, the book is about a magical black cat that you basically are going to follow each issue through different worlds, different realms. This magical black cat can basically do anything its little heart desires. And, being a cat, that can get a little crazy and a little mischievous and a lot of fun. But you basically are meeting new characters, going to new places, going on crazy adventures each issue. But eventually what our goal is that we're going to have all of these kind of little issues, little creatures, characters come together into one overall plot. I would say it's similar to Game of Thrones, but more young adult.
Nice. Yeah, I mean, I definitely already see from like the opening pages the world building that you're doing with the different lands and stuff. Do you have a lot of this mapped out in terms of like how the creatures or characters are from each different realm? And is it, I'm not trying to spoil anything, but is it the siblings that run kind of each realm?
Yes.
Okay.
Each realm, yeah, we mapped out, we have like a whole world building map to
Very cool.
our Inkblot world. And each of the siblings, you know, run some certain realms when they, you know, overran like the whole magical world.
You know, you chose fantasy. You spoke briefly that, you know, like you really enjoy the
Yeah.
fantasy genre. Why did you choose the fantasy for this book again? Like, why do you gravitate towards that? And how are you going to put your own spin to kind of make it stand out from maybe other fantasy books that are being published right now?
Well, I would say the thing that makes it stand out is the storytelling, and the fact that the basic story structure is you're just following this magical black cat that can do anything and go anywhere and be whatever it wants to be. And it's just a cat. I mean, it's like you're just following this really silly thing.
Okay.
And even looking through the world through that lens, it just shows so much difference from a lot of different fantasy genres that I've seen personally. Like most fantasy genres, I'll see a hero's journey, you know, like Luke Skywalker, Wizard of Oz type of stuff. But with this, you're really seeing like broken up snippets of characters while you are following this little magical tiny cat. But I gravitated towards the fantasy genre mostly because that's what I grew up liking. Like I loved Harry Potter growing up, Sabrina the Teenage Witch, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and then growing up even more, you know, I love Game of Thrones, Lord of the Rings. My co-creator Rusty Glad just finished reading The Wheel of Time, which is like a huge fantasy 14 novel series.
Oh,
I know, it's insane, but he's the one who writes the dialogue for everything.
Okay.
So he gets really inspired by just the way they talk. So he's constantly listening to fantasy stuff too. And we honestly just surrounded ourselves with it. Like as everyone, the reason why everyone likes fantasy is it's because it's an escape, right? And that's how I felt my entire life, is that I love fantasy genre because you're living in a different world for that amount of time that you're in it. So might as well go into multiple worlds with a fun cat.
Yeah, definitely. And so the two things that like stood out to me are obviously the cat. Is the cat Inkblot? Is that the name of the cat?
Doesn't even have a name. It
doesn't have a name. And then so what okay. So what I'm curious about too is the girl that basically discovers the cat, the seeker. Is she going to be a main focal point as well? And
she is basically the narrator of our story. So this black cat, you know, doesn't talk, just says meow, but it's magical and can do whatever it wants. So we needed someone to go along with this cat, just talking about how much she hates this cat as you're going along. But she is a main character. She is the second oldest out of the siblings of sorcery. And she's the one who basically writes down all of the magical history in the entire lands. But she's the one that's not going on adventures. She's not doing anything. All she does is write for her entire millennium. But now she has this weird tiny magical cat that is the only thing that she just doesn't understand. So throughout all the issues, she's the one that's narrating and trying to track down this cat that can go through time and space and do anything. And that's her plan, is that she's got to track this thing down and understand it.
Yeah, so. I mean, I'm telling you, like, just from that first issue, like, I'm already like, I was upset that there wasn't more. I didn't realize I had gone through it as fast as I did. So I'm very excited for the second issue. And you talked about teaming up with Rusty Glad.
Mm-hmm.
What is it like, or how has the experience been being able to work with a close friend on this book? And like, it's very, I mean, you guys are doing everything. It's all of it
Yeah,
is you guys. The
it's all.
lettering is both of you. The story is both of you. You're penciling, he's inking. So what has this experience been like so far?
Well, what I mean, full disclosure, he is actually my boyfriend.
Okay.
And we went to the Kubert school together. We were in the same class, and at the Kubert school, you basically spend these 3 years with the same classmates, unless you move around a little bit. But most of the time, you're staying in the same class with the same people. And he was in my class, so I already had experience, working beside him and being with him for all day, every day.
Mm-hmm.
And so, when we decided to create Inkblot, it was really kind of a no-brainer that we would create this very collaboratively, because for me, I'm more of the person with the general big ideas, and he's the one that likes to focus on detail. So doing this kind of Marvel method type of thing, working on Inkblot, really served us well, because I can do the general layouts, the general look of everything, while he can go in and write all of the little details and ink all the little details in there. And
Mm-hmm.
It could really come together as something that's both of ours. It's not just mine, it's not just his, but it's a totally collaborative piece, which is exciting.
That's very cool. And you say he does the dialogue, right?
He does. He writes the dialogue. It's basically, I'm the one who comes up with the action and the layouts, then I pencil it, he inks it, I color it, and then he letters it while he writes the dialoage.
Okay. Tell him that his dialogue made me laugh out loud for the first issue. There's a couple lines that just made they just had me dying. So I do wanted to ask you also, how far out do you have this planned? Like, do you have like a beginning, middle, and end already kind of mapped out in your head, and you're just gonna see how long that takes to get there? Or is it like a set amount of issues?
We don't have a set amount of issues. What we're hoping for is it to be like a very long ongoing series, because what we have is we do have a middle and we do have an end, but there can be so much more with this little cat, because of the concept that we have, is that there can be so much we can put into this world as we're going along. So we would really love the opportunity to just keep creating and keep making this world into a bigger and crazier thing. But that being said, I mean, we have an ending, we have a middle, but it all depends on how many issues,
Mm-hmm.
We can do it in this many, like in a small amount or a big amount, but we'd rather have a big amount.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's always the goal for sure. And are there any other projects that you're working on, or any other ideas that you got?
There are a couple different ideas that are happening, but they're more in the background, so not really talking about them. But yeah, it's more independent stories,
Nice.
which I think I take to a bit better, but yeah, we'll see what the future brings.
and I did want to ask, why Image? Was Image always your first choice to be the distributor?
No, I mean, Image was the one who wanted to do it.
Oh, cool.
I mean, it was really at a point where, I still consider myself at the start of my career,
Mm-hmm.
because I really did just graduate a couple of years ago, and I'm really just getting into this industry. But I would say the biggest thing was that I was just sending out my portfolio, being like, here you are, world, and Image took to it. So that was very lucky.
Yeah, I love Image. You're talking about gravitating more towards the indie stuff. I find myself gravitating further and further away from Marvel and DC. I think I don't know. It just seems like it's the same stuff sometimes. It's rare when you get something that's really different and unique at either of the
Yeah.
publishers. And I'm not trying to like talk shit about them. It's just how I feel, and I feel like there's a little bit more magic in the indie stuff. You can feel the passion a little bit more from the creators because it is their it's like their baby. You know what I mean? And it's just a different experience reading an indie comic.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, I think it all depends on, what's your favorite character, or do you like characters better than story? Like, I feel like if you like certain characters, most of the time you will gravitate towards DC and Marvel because you're reading your favorite character in any story you want. But when you gravitate more towards like the indie comics, it's more about story and that independent creator telling you, their fictional or non-fictional, whatever, type of view, which is very interesting, but it's all depends on what you like as an audience,
Yeah.
I think there's something out there for everyone.
I agree. I think more than ever,
Yeah,
there's
more than
so
ever.
much different characters representation and stuff like that. And speaking of representation, I wanted to ask you, like I said, growing up, I didn't know, there wasn't a lot of friends that read comics that were girls, right? I think that the representation for women in comics with readership and creators is growing, but I definitely don't think it's where it should be. What do you think, or what would you as a woman like to see more of in comics maybe, or do you think that?
I would say nowadays it's gotten a lot better, a lot more inclusive, and I think we just need to keep going in the direction that we're going. I mean, I think Marvel and DC have caught up, but it's doing it but we have to find a way to do it where we're not just focusing on the minority and the majority. It's more just trying to bring it all together into one thing.
Right.
I think when I was thinking about my book, I personally take more to strong female leads, just with the type of stories that I like. So that's why I created a strong female lead. And so I think having more diversity in creators rather than in fictional characters is probably the biggest thing, because if you have different kinds of creators, you're going to create different kinds of stories. And that's that.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter, because I mean, one day I would love to draw Superman. One day I would love to draw Batgirl. I'd love to do like a lot of different superheroes. But I think if you have a creator, that has a different type of mindset, like having a female artist draw Superman, that is a big step in the right direction, rather than just changing characters or just changing plots to fit everyone. It's more the creators that are the ones who create the characters and the stories that make it different.
Yeah, I agree. And then, before we get out of here, I just want a couple more questions.
Yeah.
I was wondering, what comic books or creators are you currently following or excited about right now?
Well, I would say more recently, it's more of the young adult DC comic stuff. I actually worked on a little bit as a layout artist on Raven, for the young adult DC line.
The one that Cami Garcia wrote? Okay.
Yeah, I did a little bit of the layouts for that book, and that was really fun. And I think going in that direction, like, I loved what Gabriel Piccolo did with the art and everything. I think there's another artist that's also DC. Her name is like Greta Lesky, I think her name is, but she did DC Primer, and it looks amazing. Like, I really, really love the art for that. But mostly I actually more look towards comic artists that are past. I like reading, as I said before, like Alex Raymond, Alex Toth, Frank Miller, who's not passed, but
Right,
like,
right.
I love his stuff. Darwin Cook is another big one. Um, I don't know if I read so much nowadays just because I'm the one drawing them.
Right, because you're busy. I get it. Yeah, I just thought I always like to
But
ask just to for personal reasons, and I know that I mean, me as a fan,
mhm,
before I started my channel, I always like to hear what the creators I follow are into, because like
yeah.
sometimes that's how I discover new stuff.
I think I read a little bit of Umbrella Academy, which was awesome. um, I I don't know. I think I take a bit more to the indie kind of side of things rather than mainstream superhero stuff. But
Yeah,
yeah,
I mean, because I mean, look, there's while there is editors on creator-owned stuff, it's kind of like you're letting loose a creator and being like, go do what you do.
oh
And
yes,
there's no corporations that are like, oh, maybe we scale back a little bit on that, and you can
yeah.
definitely
I mean,
see that.
with Image, they were very hands off with us. I mean, we basically created our product and they were just like, all right, let's put it out there. And I was very thankful for that. I really liked having that kind of freedom to really do what I want to with a story rather than constantly going back and forth with someone who, you know, wants to make it better, but it doesn't really know the direction that I want to go for. So having that freedom was really awesome.
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
Especially as a creator.
yeah, it's definitely a noticeable, like I said, in the difference between. I mean, not to take away from editors, because I mean, one of my favorite people in comic books is Shelley Bond, who is one of the best editors I think to ever do it. And I think that that's the problem too, is maybe there's not that many great editors anymore. So like they kind of try to put their like stamp on it, and not a way that kind of elevates the creator, but kind of diminishes the project. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I would say I think editors are definitely needed on projects, but I think it all depends on what
Yeah.
artists you work with or what creators, because I know certain creators need certain things from other people that some don't.
Right.
For me, I didn't really need an editor telling me about art and stuff, but I like it when, I have another set of eyes going over and seeing if there's any mistakes or anything.
Right.
But some creators do need that back and forth. They do need that person to work with them to kind of figure out what they need to do. But I guess it's just, you got to make a match. You got to
Yeah.
know, you got to know who you're working with and what you're dealing with there. So
Yeah.
I guess it all depends.
So before we get out of here too, I want to thank you again. And I was wondering if you could not only give us some last words on Inkblot, but
Hmm.
also afterwards maybe give us or tell us all where we can find you online. And I will also throw those links down below.
Awesome. Well, I can promise you that you'll have a good time reading Inkblot. It's fun. It'll make you smile. Um, it's it's a great adventure to go on if you want a little bit of an escape, like all fantasy worlds. Inkblot will literally lead you into this little into the different realms of this world. Um, and online, I'm on Instagram as Emma Kubert. I also run a Inkblot mini comic on Instagram. So if you look up Inkblot comic, you'll see news about Inkblot, the full length comic, and you'll see mini comics that are just little magical adventures that you'll go on online. And
Awesome.
then I'm on Twitter as Emma Kubert, and I have a website, emmahubert.com.
Okay, awesome, man. Thank you so much. And like I said before, I'll throw all those links down in the below for everybody listening and watching. Emma, thank you so much again for taking time out to talk to me. Can't
Thank
wait for
you.
Inkblot.
Yay.
And let's do this again. Maybe at the end of the first arc, maybe we catch up and talk again.
Oh, definitely.
All right.
I'm down for it.
All right, cool. Awesome. Have a good one.
All right, you too.
All right, bye.
Bye.